12 questions to an experienced designer at Transport for London Digital, Daniela Barbeira.
So I'm an experienced designer at Transport for London. I work on the digital team there, and I've been in TfL for 2.5 years now. So I've worked in a variety of projects.
What is your background?
This was my first job, like full on in the digital world. I had a background in graphic design and branding mainly. I lived in Spain before I came to London, so I worked there for a few years and did a variety of projects in like environmental graphics, branding for businesses, editorial design, a lot of different things. Then I came to London and studied an MA in Central St. Martin's. And after that, I just kind of fell in love with like human behavior in design and digital tools. And I ended up in TfL. So now I'm working there as a digital designer.
What made you interested in inclusive design?
I feel like inclusion and accessibility and kind of just a general concept of designing for everyone is something that I was always interested about. I always felt quite passionate for projects that were developed, for example, for the public sector or things that had kind of a strong impact in communities. But it wasn't really part of my day-to-day life as a graphic designer and working in branding for companies and so on. It was kind of this interest that I had on the side, but I had never really looked more deeply into it. It was definitely something that I felt like TfL could bring to me. I mean, that was one of the biggest reasons why I was so interested in working there. But then when I started, I felt like I had kind of an awakening moment for like the whole world of like how design can actually make a huge difference in the lives of everyone, and how inclusion can actually be a very kind of tangible part of what designers can do every day. And of course, like how that all happens in the digital space. So we have quite a lot of specific training in TfL around equality, like around how we develop different assets, kind of things in the network, digital products, a lot of different things, considering everyone, people with disabilities, and making sure that we actually deliver services that are robust and resilient for everyone. So that was where I kind of came across the actual processes that can be put in place, and a lot of also feedback of how very inclusive products can actually make a big difference in people's lives through user testing that we've done. We had training where we got to actually experience, for example, a journey in London with someone that, in my case, that had a visual impairment. So this is the sort of things that working in a place like TfL can really offer. And I feel like it was super eye-opening for me.
How do you build empathy with diverse audiences?
Yeah, so we have a disability equality training that is kind of company-wide. So I think almost everyone in different departments can apply for. And this is quite interesting because you get to actually take a journey in the network with someone that has a disability or any sort of accessibility need.
What are you currently working on at Transport for London?
So currently I work a lot in planning to travel tools. So I'm very focused on the journey planning experience. So the tool that allows users to plan journeys from one point to the other and gives them a specific itinerary. And I look at this tool on our TfL Go app that we just launched last summer. And also just considering how to apply that sort of experience to future touch points, web experiences, and other things that we are developing to be launched in the future.
Could you tell us more about the TfL Go project?
Yes, so TfL Go is an app that allows users to plan to travel in London. It has a very dynamic digital map that is overlaid with live information. And it has a huge focus on inclusion. So what we try to do with the app in terms of, for example, accessibility to travel and travel access was to have these products that would basically kind of embed like information for special accessibility needs into like the mainstream side of the product. So you can use the app in a step-free mode or in a kind of no access needs mode, and it changes completely the interface and kind of how the maps display information. It has live arrivals, it has status, so it's kind of this new tool that we have out there that we're going to keep on evolving, that just allows us to get a lot closer to our customers and to deliver information whenever it's needed, but also being very mindful of the fact that we are catering for people with a lot of different range of needs, and that we need to be just to adapt to those different needs. So the app is great for that.
And what were your main challenges?
The way that we've developed the app, like mainly even from a visual design point of view, it is really strongly aligned with the language that we have out there in the network. So we really dig into kind of those principles that have a lot to do with inclusion as well, like everything being quite clear, this system of colors that we have for the lines and these very recognizable assets. We really wanted that to be part of the digital experience as well. And I think that has been one of the challenges, but also one of the really interesting kind of opportunities in designing for this app. It's a travel app, so naturally a lot of things will be happening on it. You have different status, you have a lot of different information you need to deliver, but we still want to make sure that the experience is quite peaceful and that it's quite clear, that we're not showing a lot of things at the same time. The craft of the design is also something that we care a lot about, to make sure that we stick to the historical design language that we have in TfL. So bringing all of that into a digital product and making sure that we do it in a way where we can still scale it and we can deliver a lot of information and bring more and more into it, but making sure that we adhere to those principles. That has been quite interesting.
What accessibility challenges did you work with?
I think being able to explain very, very complex concepts is something that we deal with quite a lot. So kind of all the different details that we have in platforms and ramps and the way that the network works, and being able to find ways to explain that complexity in a way that it's still, like I was saying, like easy to digest, that it doesn't have a lot of extra information, but also that also doesn't simplify too much, and doesn't take a lot of the complexity that actually has to be explained. I think that side of it has been quite important.
Did you engage with underrepresented communities?
So we have quite a lot of user testing for the app, but also testing kind of future concepts and things that we are still playing around. We've done specific user testing with mobility impaired users and with visually impaired users, which was really, really interesting, just to see how everyone takes a travel planning app and just plans everything from that point of view of needing step-free access, of needing to know a lot of details from the journey that maybe other people wouldn't necessarily need to know. I'm not directly involved in kind of setting up the user testing and just contacting with communities. We have colleagues that are quite focused on that side of things. And also TfL has a lot of connections and even internal groups that can provide those connections with us to make sure that we can talk with communities that actually experience these things day to day and can actually bring their insights. But as a designer working in a project like this, it's been really interesting to just be able to just to get that first-hand feedback, or even just seeing someone using our app without using the visuals at all, for example, and just making sure that the voiceover experience is delivering like a similar experience and is actually allowing for quite complex actions to be completed.
Could we see the app?
Sure, I can show you. So this is TfL Go. Like I was saying, it's an app that has a dynamic map that offers quite a lot of information. We have different areas that are focused on kind of different sorts of information about the network. So for example, we offer bus stops near the place where the user is. We have a status bar that mirrors the status bar that you find in the stations as well. that offers disruption information and kind of gives a sense of what's happening in the network. And then we have the map that allows users to consult live arrivals and different kinds of information around the stations. We have accessibility focused information like toilets and things like that as well. And we are quite detailed on the type of access that can be found in the different platforms. So just gonna try another one. Yeah, so like I was saying, the app gives quite a lot of information on the type of access that each platform offers, live arrivals as well. Sorry. And it then has a step-free mode that changes completely the information that comes in the map. So you can then see detailed information around the type of access that each line has. We then have these badges that come up and give more information. So in a nutshell, this is what you can find across the app. Then the work that I do is a lot more focused on this specific tool, like I was saying. So the journey planning tool that we call directions in the app, which brings back itineraries that the users can plan from a specific point to another specific point in London. So this is the list of results that we offer. We try to be quite clear on the way that we explain kind of what's the benefit of each one of the different journeys that we offer. So they are all labeled with a very specific title. We bring back a step-free journey by default that is badged with the type of access that can be found. And then users can always change the mode of the app into a step-free mode that allows them to plan either journeys that have lifts and basically step-free up to the point that they reach the platform, or journeys that actually allow someone to get into the train with kind of level access, which is important for certain types of wheelchairs, for example. So whenever the mode is changed, the results are also updated. So in this case, we now get a list of results that are all step-free to train, so that all allow that direct access from the street into the train, and it changes completely the sort of results that will come back. So you can basically cater it to that specific need. And the mode is kind of app-wide. So whenever you change something on the map, it then also has an impact on the sort of directions that you would get if you're planning a journey more kind of in an itinerary base.
How did COVID-19 impact the design of the app?
These are some results that we brought back into the app with kind of a strong focus on what we had to do for the network after the first lockdown. So we had this need to kind of offer more walking and cycling results and make sure that we could actually ask users to prioritize that mode if it's something that they could do. So we wanted to kind of nudge people to walk and cycle more and consider these active travel options, which basically meant taking a look at what sort of situations, in what sort of situations it would make sense to prioritize a walking route versus public transport, and kind of how we could communicate that message. So we built these sort of results into the app by comparing the distances and offering different types of messages. So for example, in this case, if you have a walking and a cycling results that are slightly longer than what the time it will take you to take the journey in public transport, we tell you to please walk or cycle if you can, but we're still prioritizing these results. If you, for example, plan a journey that is quite far away, you would still find these results, but they will then appear. For example, you can only have a cycle route, so it's kind of too far to walk, it will take you a really long time, but if we still tell you, like, if you can cycle this route. But for example, in terms of the step-free modes, this was an area where we had to give it some thought, because we were not 100% sure whether we should still prioritize long walks and kind of long cycling routes or not, if these would still make sense. So we had quite a lot of discussions internally in our team, based on kind of information that we knew from like previous ethnographic studies and previous user testing, to try to understand what would be the best approach. But then in user testing, this was actually an area where we got quite a lot of feedback. So in our first iteration, we were still offering these results, following the kind of same rules that we had for the step-free mode. We had some interesting feedback. So some users were like, oh, it's great to see that we can walk or we can cycle, even if it's something that, for example, I wouldn't do, but it's great to see that these options are there. And there's a lot of people that might have a mobility impairment, but they might still cycle. So this also kind of challenges our perception of who a cyclist can be, or what a bicycle needs to look like, for example. But we also got some people that were quite strong, they had quite strong views in terms of not wanting to have those results prioritized if it's something that clearly they wouldn't take because they need a step-free route. So we should assume that they wouldn't cycle for example, 30 minutes. So what we did was we still bringing back these results, but we deprioritize them. So they always show up at the end of the route. And if we look at, for example, closer results, we can see the difference in the two types of results. So for example, we have walking and cycling in the end in a step-free to train route. But if you're planning a route with no access needs, then these results come up and we're actually nudging you to take them.
Some designers find inclusive approach quite limiting. What do you think?
I mean, I can totally see where that point of view comes from. It's definitely, so having to consider, like, especially the specific accessibility focused rules when you're designing from a visual point of view, and when you have brand guidelines that you want to adhere to, or that you actually want to expand, and you really want to do a lot visually and make sure that you have a product that, you know, looks pretty and it's kind of very appealing. It might come as a shock that suddenly you need to start thinking about things like contrast and things like the structure of the layout being, you know, something that is quite logical because it needs to work with different sort of assistive technologies or with voiceover, for example. So I can totally see how some people might find that quite limiting, because it's a very different mindset when you're designing. To just not be able to think, oh, I'm going to tune these down a little bit. I'm going to use a slightly lighter color because it gives me this sort of just visual feel, and then have to kind of use a contrast checker and be like, oh yeah, this doesn't work. But personally, I find these sort of limitations or these sort of constraints quite interesting, even from a visual design point of view, and even trying to think of just look and feel and what things are supposed to look in the end. I found that having to consider some of these aspects is actually something that I feel like is making me a better visual designer as well. And like generally, if a layout is well structured to work, for example, in the context of web, to work with a screen reader or for you to be able to tab through, for example, then it will be a layout that visually is also very clear and everything is going to be exactly in the specific place. So it's interesting to see that that what might come across as a limitation first might actually be something that makes you a better designer in the end. And I find it really interesting to try to still find a room to make things visually appealing and to make sure that we deliver that side of things as well, while adhering to the accessibility rules. We've had some really, really interesting design sessions where we were really trying to, you know, to find that specific point. And yeah, that's, I find it interesting. I don't think it's too limiting.
Where should designers start with accessibility?
So there's a lot of resources online. There's obviously WCAG that can be read in terms of web guidelines. It's a quite big document, so it can be a little bit intimidating, but It's always good to go through it, and there's quite a lot of other resources that can be found. I think that the design community is now, at least in terms of digital, is quite aware of accessibility needs, and there's a lot out there in forums and websites where you can find information. I think starting in that point is quite important, and at least here in London, I mean, and now kind of globally, if we can just use, you know, this sort of remote, more social moments. There's quite a lot of groups that get together to talk about these aspects as well. It's definitely the sort of place where I've learned a lot. Like we regularly go to, for example, cross-government events where we have different people from public sector that are working in accessibility in kind of their own areas. And these sort of moments where you can see someone explaining their work and you can talk to someone and kind of, you know, share your experience, get their insights is quite important. So yeah, just trying to reach out to the community and then starting designing and trying to apply the rules and making sure that I think we're all learning and we're all trying to kind of change the face of how digital projects in general work and what they can offer. So not feeling too scared to try and to fail and to try again and to keep going.